Marcus Thorne walked into the lobby of the Aveline Hotel like he owned the place. He had his mistress Sophie on his arm, a reservation at the city's most exclusive restaurant, and a plan to humiliate his wife Elena on their 10th anniversary. He thought Elena was just a naive housewife who got lucky marrying a businessman like him. He thought he was untouchable. But Marcus made one fatal calculation error that night. He didn't check the deed to the building, because if he had, he would have realized that the staff opening the doors for him weren't smiling out of respect. They were smiling because his wife, Elena Vance, had just bought the entire hotel that morning. And she was watching everything from the security monitors in the penthouse. This is the story of how a cheating husband walked into his own anniversary party and accidentally checked into his worst nightmare. Marcus Thorne checked his reflection in the rearview mirror of his leased Mercedes S-Class. He adjusted his silk tie, a Charvet, obviously, and smirked. At 42, Marcus felt he had finally arrived. He was the regional VP of sales for Apex Logistics, a mid-sized shipping firm that paid him enough to look rich even if his credit cards were quietly maxing out every month. To the outside world, Marcus was the picture of success, but the architecture of his life was built on deception. "Are you sure we should be doing this here, Mark?" The voice came from the passenger seat. Sophie Miller, 24 years old and stunningly beautiful in a red dress that cost more than Marcus's first car, looked up from her phone. She was an influencer with 50,000 followers, and Marcus was her current favorite sponsor. "Relax, babe," Marcus said, resting a hand on her knee. "Elena thinks I'm stuck in a board meeting until 8. I told her to meet me at the hotel restaurant at 8:30 for a quiet anniversary drink. That gives us exactly 2 hours to enjoy the spa suite." Sophie giggled, the sound light and airy, devoid of any guilt. "You're terrible. What if she sees us?" "She won't," Marcus said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Eleanor is predictable. She's probably at home right now, ironing a dress she's had since 2015, worrying about whether to wear the pearl earrings I bought her, or the fake diamond studs. She doesn't come to places like the Aveline. It's too high-end for her sensibilities." He wasn't entirely wrong about Elena's sensibilities, but he was dead wrong about her reach. Marcus pulled up to the valet stand of the Aveline. It was a historic Beaux-Arts structure in the center of the city, recently renovated and rebranded as the ultimate destination for the elite. A night here cost $2,000 minimum. Marcus had burned a month's worth of bonus points to book the suite for the afternoon, intending to check out before his wife even arrived. He tossed the keys to the valet, a young man named Leo. "Keep it close, kid. I'm in a rush," Marcus said, not bothering to make eye contact. Leo caught the keys, his face impassive. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Welcome back to the Aveline." Marcus didn't notice the slight pause in Leo's voice. He didn't notice the earpiece Leo was wearing, or the way Leo's eyes flicked up to the security camera mounted above the gilded entrance. "Let's go," Marcus whispered to Sophie, guiding her hand through the crook of his arm. They swept through the revolving doors into the lobby. It was a cathedral of marble and gold leaf, a massive crystal chandelier rumored to be from the Titanic's sister ship hung overhead. "Wow," Sophie breathed, pulling out her phone to record a story. "Mark, this is insane." "Only the best for you," he lied. He marched to the front desk. The receptionist, a woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper bob named Clarissa, looked up. "Checking in. Thorne. Marcus Thorne." Clarissa typed for a moment, her eyes scanning the screen. Then she stopped. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. "Ah, yes. Mr. Thorne. The presidential suite upgrade. Marcus blinked. He hadn't booked the presidential suite. That was $5,000 a night. Yes, of course, the upgrade. He assumed it was a loyalty perk. He was a diamond member after all. Excellent, Clarissa said. She handed him a black keycard with a gold A embossed on it. You are all set. Enjoy your stay. And happy anniversary. Marcus froze. He hadn't mentioned his anniversary to the booking agent. He was here with his mistress. Thanks, he muttered, grabbing the card and hustling Sophie toward the elevators. She knew it was your anniversary, Sophie asked, raising an eyebrow as the elevator doors closed. Corporate profile. Marcus waved it off, sweating slightly. They track everything these days, probably an automated flag. The elevator whisked them up to the 40th floor. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. He was pulling it off. He was going to spend the afternoon with his gorgeous mistress in the best suite in the city, then go downstairs, play the dutiful husband, and buy his plain, boring wife a mediocre dinner. He was the master of his universe. He didn't know that the elevator he was standing in had been remotely prioritized by the owner of the hotel to ensure he arrived on the 40th floor at a very specific time. 40 floors above in the penthouse office that wasn't listed on any public floor plan. Eleanor Vance sat in a Herman Miller chair, watching a wall of monitors. Eleanor looked nothing like the woman Marcus described to his friends. To Marcus, she was mousy. She wore oversized sweaters, drove a 2016 Honda Civic, and worked part-time at a local library because she liked the quiet. That was all true, but it was a choice, not a necessity. Elena was the sole beneficiary of the Vance estate, a legacy of old money rooted in steel and shipping that dated back to the Industrial Revolution. When her father, Harrison Vance, died 5 years ago, he left her everything. The portfolio, the real estate, the shell companies, and the liquid assets. She had never told Marcus. When they met, Marcus had been charming, ambitious, and seemingly kind. Eleanor, terrified of being loved only for her money, had introduced herself as a library assistant. She wanted to see if he loved her. By the time they married, she realized Marcus loved himself more than anyone else, but she stayed hoping he would mature. Instead, he had rotted. Mrs. Vance? Elena turned her chair. Standing in the doorway was Julian, the general manager of the Aveline. Julian was a man of impeccable taste and absolute discretion. He was one of the 3 people in the city who knew Elena was the true owner of the hotel group. Is he in the room? Elena asked, her voice calm. Too calm. Yes, ma'am, Julian said, checking his tablet. He entered the presidential suite with a Ms. Sophie Miller, approximate age 24, social media handle Sophie So Chic. Elena let out a short, dry laugh. Of course, the influencer. He's predictable, isn't he, Julian? Painfully so, ma'am. Elena stood up. She was wearing a tailored navy jumpsuit that screamed quiet luxury, something she never wore around Marcus. Around him, she was plain Elena. Here she was, the boss. He thinks I'm meeting him at 8:30 for dinner, Elena said, walking to the window that overlooked the city skyline. He's going to try to rush that girl out the back entrance at 8:00. We can arrange for the back exits to be temporarily under maintenance, Julian suggested smoothly. No, Elena said. She turned back to the screens. She watched the feed from the hallway of the 40th floor. I don't want to trap him. Trapping him is too easy. I want him to hang himself. I want him to believe right up until the knife drops that he is the smartest person in the room. She looked at Julian. Did you switch the champagne in the suite? Yes, ma'am. We replaced the Dom Perignon with the Cuvée de Prestige, the 1998 vintage. Good, Elena said. Marcus pretends to know wine, but he can't tell the difference between a Pinot and a Merlot. He'll drink it because the label looks expensive, but when the bill comes, he's going to be surprised. That bottle isn't comped. And the dinner reservation, Julian asked. Keep it, Elena said, but move it to the chef's table, the one in the center of the room, the one where everyone can see. And Ms. Miller, Elena's eyes hardened. She's a victim of his lies too likely, or maybe she knows. Either way, treat her with the utmost hospitality. I want her to fall in love with this hotel. I want her to never want to leave. Elena picked up her phone. It was a cheap, cracked iPhone she used for her Eleanor Thorne persona. She opened her texts and sent a message to Marcus. Happy anniversary, darling. I'm running a bit early. Might be there by 7:45. Love you. On the screen, she saw the door to the presidential suite fly open. Marcus stumbled out into the hallway, shirtless, reading the text on his phone with a look of sheer panic. Elena smiled. Let the games begin. Marcus stared at his phone, his heart hammering against his ribs. 7:45. That was in 20 minutes. He rushed back into the suite. Sophie was lounging on the king-sized bed, sipping the champagne. Babe, we have to go, Marcus barked, grabbing his shirt from the floor. What? We just got here, Sophie whined. And this champagne is delicious. Look at the view. Elena is coming early, Marcus said, fumbling with his buttons. She's insane. She probably tracked my phone. I thought you said she was stupid, Sophie pouted, setting the glass down. She is, but she's clingy. Come on, get dressed. Marcus ran to the bathroom to splash water on his face. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked flushed. Guilty. Pull it together, Thorne. He walked back out. Okay, here's the plan. You go down to the lobby bar, have a drink. I'll meet Elena. Have a quick dinner. I'll fake a stomachache or a work emergency, and I'll be back with you by 9:30. I'll book you a room on a different floor so you don't have to leave. Sophie stood up, crossing her arms. You're leaving me alone in a bar on your anniversary? That's tacky, Mark. It's strategic, he snapped. Then, softening his tone, he pulled out his wallet. He handed her his black credit card. Here, buy whatever you want at the boutique downstairs. Put it on the card. Just give me an hour. Sophie took the card, her eyes lighting up. Fine, but you owe me. They hurried to the elevator. Marcus checked his watch. 7:35 p.m. He had 10 minutes to get Sophie out of sight and compose himself. As the elevator descended, it stopped at the 20th floor. The doors opened. A woman walked in. Marcus stopped breathing. It wasn't Elena. It was Mrs. Gable, the wife of the CEO of Apex Logistics, Marcus's boss. Marcus? Mrs. Gable asked, adjusting her glasses. She looked from Marcus to Sophie, who was clearly not his wife, and clearly dressed for a date. Mrs. Gable, Marcus choked out. What a surprise. Indeed, she said icily. She looked at Sophie. And who is this? This is my niece, Marcus blurted out. Sophie. She's visiting from college. Sophie glared at him but didn't say anything. She knew better than to blow up the sugar daddy's spot in front of his boss's wife. Niece, Mrs. Gable repeated. I see. Well, Marcus, my husband is downstairs in the lounge. You should say hello. He was just talking about the quarterly review. I will, Marcus stammered. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. And there, standing right in front of the elevator bank, holding a small, sad-looking gift bag, was Elena. She wasn't wearing the old dress Marcus had imagined. She was wearing a stunning emerald green gown that fit her perfectly. Her hair was done up. She looked expensive. Marcus felt the world tilt. "Marcus," Elena said, her voice sweet and confused. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Mrs. Gable. And then her eyes landed on Sophie. For a second there was silence. The lobby of the Aveline seemed to hold its breath. "Elena!" Marcus shouted too loud. He stepped out, practically shoving Sophie behind him. "You're early. I was just escorting my... and Mrs. Gable down." Elena's eyes widened. "Niece, I didn't know your sister had a daughter named Sophie." Marcus froze. He had forgotten. He didn't have a sister. "Your sister," Elena repeated, tilting her head slightly to the side. The diamonds in her ears caught the light of the lobby chandelier. "Marcus, you're an only child. Your parents passed away before we met." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a diamond. Mrs. Gable adjusted her glasses, her gaze shifting from Marcus to the young, scantily clad niece with the judgmental precision of a forensic accountant. Marcus felt sweat trickle down his back. I meant my cousin's sister, you know, from the upstate branch of the family. Distant. Very distant. This is Sophie. She's studying theology." Sophie choked on a laugh, turning it into a cough. "Theology," she muttered under her breath, shooting daggers at Marcus. "How fascinating." Eleanor said, her voice warm and devoid of suspicion. She stepped forward and took Sophie's hand. "It is so lovely to meet family I didn't know existed. Marcus is usually so private about his extended relatives." Eleanor turned to Mrs. Gable. "And Mrs. Gable, wonderful to see you. Is Arthur here?" "He is," Mrs. Gable said, her tone softening as she looked at Elena. "He's just finishing a call in the lounge. He'll be joining me for dinner shortly." "Perfect." Elena clapped her hands together. "Marcus isn't that serendipitous. We have a reservation at the Obsidian, the hotel's signature restaurant. Why don't you all join us?" Marcus's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. "Eleanor, no, it's our anniversary. I'm sure Mrs. Gable wants privacy, and Sophie has homework. Lots of theology to read." "Nonsense," Mrs. Gable said, a cruel glint in her eye. She had seen enough executive affairs to know exactly what this was, and she was eager to see how Marcus would handle the rope he was hanging himself with. "Arthur and I would be delighted, and we couldn't possibly leave your niece to eat alone on such a lovely night." "I'd love to come," Sophie said, smiling sweetly at Marcus. "I'm starving, and I'd love to hear more about how Uncle Marcus and Auntie Elena met." Marcus felt like he was having a stroke. "Great," he croaked. "Just great." The group moved toward the restaurant entrance. As they walked, Marcus tried to hang back to whisper to Sophie, but Elena looped her arm through his, pulling him close. "You smell expensive, darling," Elena whispered, sniffing his collar. "Is that the cologne I bought you or something? New?" "Same old stuff." Marcus lied. It was actually a custom scent Sophie had bought him for his birthday. They arrived at the podium of the Obsidian. It was a dimly lit, ultra-modern space where the walls were lined with backlit onyx and the waitstaff moved like ninjas. It was the hardest reservation to get in the city. The maitre d', a man named Henri, who usually terrified patrons with his snootiness, looked up. He saw Marcus and put on his professional mask. Then he saw Elena. His back straightened. His eyes widened imperceptibly. He practically leaped from behind the podium. "Mr. Thorne," Henri said, but his eyes were locked on Elena. "And, Madame, we have the chef's table prepared for you. We received the call about the expanded party size just moments ago." Marcus frowned. "We didn't call anyone." "I handled it while we were walking," Elena said breezily, tapping her phone. "I used the app. Technology, right?" Henri led them not to a quiet corner, but to the raised circular table in the dead center of the room. It was surrounded by a thin curtain of falling water, a privacy screen that still allowed the entire restaurant to see who was important enough to sit there. As they sat, Arthur Gable, the CEO of Apex Logistics, approached the table. He was a large man with a booming voice and a terrifying reputation. "Thorne," Gable barked. "My wife tells me we're crashing your anniversary. Bold move, son." "Mr. Gable." Marcus stood up, his legs shaking. "It's an honor." "Sit down, sit down." Gable waved him off. He looked at Elena. And this must be the famous Elena. "Marcus tells us you work at a library." Elena smiled. It wasn't the shy smile Marcus was used to. It was a shark's smile disguised as a pearl. "I do enjoy books, Arthur, but I dabble in real estate here and there, to keep the mind sharp." "Real estate?" Marcus scoffed, pouring himself water with a trembling hand. "She owns a condo her dad left her in Jersey. Hardly real estate, babe." Elena didn't correct him. She just picked up the wine list. It was leather-bound and heavy. "Let me handle this, Mark," she said. "I know you usually order the house red, but since it's a special occasion—" She didn't even open the book. She looked at the sommelier, who had materialized at her elbow. "Jean-Luc," Elena said. "Madame," the sommelier bowed low. "We'll start with the Salon Le Mesnil 2002 for a toast. Then for the appetizers, the Montrachet from Domaine de la Romanée Conti. And for the main course, surprise us. Something from the private cellar. Maybe the 82 La Tour." The table went silent. Marcus's jaw dropped. He knew enough to know that Eleanor had just ordered about $15,000 worth of wine in 30 seconds. "Elena," Marcus hissed, "what are you doing? We can't afford that." "Oh, hush," Elena laughed, patting his hand. "I've been saving my library pennies. It's on me." Mr. Gable looked at Elena with newfound respect. "That is an aggressive order, Mrs. Thorne. You know your vintages." "I read a lot," Elena said demurely. "So Sophie, tell us about your studies. What aspect of theology interests you most? Is it the concept of sin?" Sophie, who was currently chewing on a breadstick, froze. Yeah. Sin. Ideally. Forgiveness." "Forgiveness is expensive," Elena said, locking eyes with Sophie. "It usually costs more than people are willing to pay." Under the table, Marcus felt a foot slide up his leg. He looked at Sophie, pleading with his eyes for her to stop. She winked and took a sip of water. This wasn't dinner. It was a hostage negotiation. By the time the appetizers arrived, scallops with truffle foam that cost more than Marcus's weekly paycheck, Marcus was on his third glass of the Salon. He needed the alcohol to numb the impending doom. The dynamic at the table had shifted in a way Marcus couldn't understand. Usually when he went out with Mr. Gable, Marcus was the jester dancing for the king's amusement. But tonight, Mr. Gable was ignoring him entirely. He was captivated by Elena. "So you're saying," Gable said, leaning in over his plate, "that the logistics of the shipping lanes in the South China Sea are actually impacted more by insurance premiums than the fuel surcharges toll." "Precisely," Elena said, cutting a piece of scallop with surgical precision. "If Apex shifted its hub from Singapore to Vietnam, you'd cut overhead by 12% in the first quarter alone. But Marcus probably told you that already. He's the VP of sales after all." All eyes turned to Marcus. He had a mouthful of bread. Well, the Vietnam infrastructure is..." Marcus stammered. He had no idea what she was talking about. He hadn't looked at a logistics report in months. He just signed whatever his assistant put in front of him. "Marcus feels Singapore has better golf courses," Mr. Gable said dryly. He looked back at Elena. "You are a sharp woman, Elena. Why on earth are you hiding in a library?" "I like to observe," Elena said. "You learn a lot about people when they think you're just part of the furniture." Sophie, feeling ignored and sensing the power shifting away from the man she was sleeping with, decided to assert herself. "Mark promised to take me to Singapore," she interrupted, "for my graduation trip." "Did he now?" Elena turned to her. "That's generous. Marcus, didn't you say your bonus was cut this year?" I have savings," Marcus lied. "Right," Elena said. "The savings." Suddenly the lights in the restaurant dimmed. A spotlight hit the center of the room. "Oh God," Marcus whispered. "What now?" A team of waiters marched toward their table. One carried a massive bouquet of black roses. Another carried a silver platter with a covered dome. A third carried a bottle of cognac that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Happy anniversary," the staff chorused. The entire restaurant applauded. Marcus forced a smile, waving to the strangers. "Open it, darling," Elena said, gesturing to the silver platter. "I organized a little surprise." Marcus reached for the handle of the dome. "Please be a watch," he prayed. "Please be a Rolex, so I can pawn it later to pay for this dinner." He lifted the lid. Sitting on the silver platter was not a watch. It was a stack of papers. Marcus frowned. "What is this?" "Read it," Elena said, taking a sip of her wine. Marcus picked up the top sheet. It was a printout. Subject: urgent. Past due notice on visa. Ending in 4490, amount owed $24,500. Marcus shoved the paper down his face, turning crimson. "Elena, this isn't funny. Why would you wrap a bill?" "Oh, keep going," Elena said. "There's more." Marcus lifted the next sheet. Title deed, transfer, request, property, 42, Oak Drive. The Thorn resident status rejected due to lack of funds. "I was trying to refinance," Marcus hissed, his voice dropping to a whisper so the Gables wouldn't hear. To renovate the kitchen for you." "That's sweet," Elena said. "But look at the last one. That's the real gift." Marcus picked up the final piece of paper. It was a photograph, high resolution, taken from a security camera. It showed Marcus and Sophie standing at the front desk of the Avaline just 2 hours ago. The timestamp was clearly visible. And below it, a transcript of the audio recording from the desk. Marcus: "Elena thinks I'm stuck in a board meeting until 8. That gives us exactly 2 hours to enjoy the spa suite." Marcus felt the blood drain from his entire body. He looked up. Elena wasn't smiling anymore. Her face was a mask of cold, hard marble. "You?" Marcus whispered. "How did you get this?" "This is illegal. You can't just access hotel security records." "Actually," Mr. Gable interrupted, peering at the photo over Marcus's shoulder. "That's a good point. How did you get this, Elena?" "The Aveline is notorious for its privacy protocols." Elena stood up slowly. She smoothed her dress. "Jean-Luc," she called out. The sommelier stepped forward instantly. "Yes, Mrs. Vance." Marcus blinked. "Vance, her name is Thorne." "Not anymore," Elena said. She looked down at her husband. "And to answer your question, Arthur, I didn't hack the security records." She gestured to the room around her, the onyx walls, the falling water, the staff who were all watching her with reverence. "I own the records," Elena said calmly. "I own the cameras. I own the wine cellar. I own the building the land it sits on, and the mortgage on that leased Mercedes you gave to the valet." She leaned in close to Marcus, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of an executioner's blade. "I own the hotel, Marcus. I bought the controlling stake this morning. You didn't check into a hotel, you checked into my house, and you brought your trash into my living room." Sophie gasped, dropping her fork. Mr. Gable looked from Elena to Marcus, his mouth open. You own the Aveline?" Marcus stuttered. "But the library." "I own that too," Elena said. "I donated the new wing last year. I work there because I like the smell of old paper. Unlike you, I don't need a job to prove I'm important." Elena turned to Mr. Gable. "Arthur, I apologize for the scene, but I think you should know that your VP of sales has been charging his business trips with this young lady to the company corporate card. My forensic accountants are currently emailing the file to your HR department." "He what?" Mr. Gable roared, his face turning purple. Elena picked up her clutch. "Happy anniversary, Marcus. You have 10 minutes to vacate my property. Oh, and the bill for dinner." She gestured to the table laden with empty bottles and truffles. "It's about $6,000. I've blocked your joint account cards. I hope you have cash." She turned and walked away. The staff parted for her like the Red Sea. Marcus sat frozen in the center of the restaurant, the sound of the waterfall suddenly sounding like a toilet flushing on his entire life. The silence that descended upon the chef's table at the Obsidian was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the gentle, mocking trickle of the privacy waterfall that surrounded them. Just moments ago, that water had felt like a shield of exclusivity. Now it felt like the bars of a cage. Marcus Thorne sat frozen, staring at the empty space where his wife had just stood. The scent of her perfume, a complex blend of sandalwood and jasmine that he had never noticed before, lingered in the air, a ghostly reminder of the woman he had underestimated for a decade. He looked at his hands. They were shaking so violently that he had to grip the edge of the table to steady them. Arthur Gable broke the silence first. He didn't shout. He didn't cause a scene. His voice was a low, vibrating rumble that was infinitely more terrifying than a scream. "Thorne!" Marcus jerked his head toward his boss, his eyes wide and desperate. "Arthur, please, listen to me. She's unwell. The divorce talk, it's made her irrational. She's making things up to hurt me. I didn't embezzle." "Stop," Gable said, cutting the air with his hand. He pulled his own smartphone from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "I just received the email from her forensic accounting team. I'm looking at the PDF right now, Marcus. Do you want me to read the line items aloud?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Item 402. Gable read, scrolling with a thick finger. April 14th, $4,000 at the Sapphire Room. You listed this as client entertainment with the representatives from the shipping union. We checked the logs, Marcus. The union reps were in Chicago that week. And the Sapphire Room is a gentleman's club, unless you were negotiating freight costs with a pole dancer that is not a logistics expense. Mrs. Gable adjusted her rimless glasses, looking at Marcus as if he were a stain on the pristine white tablecloth. And to think, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, I actually felt pity for you. I thought you were a hard-working man, saddled with a plain, unambitious wife. She's not plain, Arthur. She's terrifying, and frankly quite impressive. You're fired, Marcus, Gable said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Effective immediately. Our legal team will be in touch regarding restitution. If you can't pay back the $60,000 you stole, we go to the district attorney. You're looking at felony fraud and grand larceny. The Gables didn't even say goodbye. They simply turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Marcus alone with the wreckage of his life. Next to him, Sophie was typing furiously on her phone. She hadn't looked up once during the firing. Sophie, Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. Baby, I need you to. I need a minute to figure this out. It's a massive misunderstanding. Elena is just vindictive. Sophie finally looked up. Her eyes, usually wide with faux admiration, were now cold and calculating. The facade of the adoring influencer had shattered. A misunderstanding, she repeated, her voice shrill. You're broke, Mark. Worse than broke, you're about to get sued by a Fortune 500 company. And you lied to me. You said you were a partner at the firm. You said you were rich. I will be. I just need to fix this with Elena. It's a temporary cash flow problem. Fix it. She owns the building we're sitting in. She owns the security cameras. She probably owns the chair you're sweating on. Sophie stood up, grabbing her designer purse, which Marcus realized with a pang of nausea he had paid for with the company card. I have to go. I can't be associated with this. It's bad for my brand. Wait. Where are you going? Marcus reached for her arm, but she recoiled. I'm calling an Uber, and don't text me. Seriously, Mark, lose my number. If my followers find out I was dating an embezzler, I'll lose my sponsorships. She practically sprinted toward the exit, dodging waiters, leaving Marcus completely alone in the center of the crowded restaurant. He looked around. The other diners were staring. The whispers were starting. He was the man whose wife had walked out, whose boss had fired him, and whose mistress had fled, all in the span of 10 minutes. A shadow fell over the table. Jean-Luc, the sommelier, materialized at his elbow. His face was a mask of professional indifference. He held a small black leather folder. The bill, monsieur. Marcus stared at the leather folder. He felt like throwing up. He opened it with trembling fingers. His vision blurred as he scanned the itemized list. Wax, Salon Le Mesnil, 2002. Domaine de la Romanée Conti. Montrachet, $9,500. Chateau Latour, 1982. For $200. Tasting menu, 4 packs, $200. Service charge, 20%, $2,150. Total. Due $18,450. Marcus swallowed hard. He pulled out his wallet. It felt thin. He pulled out his primary Visa card. Jean-Luc took it without a word and walked to the portable terminal. He inserted the chip. The machine whirred. Then a loud, angry beep echoed through the quiet space. "Declined," Jean-Luc said, his voice carrying just enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Try this one." Marcus handed over his MasterCard. Jean-Luc repeated the process. "Beep. Also declined, monsieur. The code indicates card reported lost or stolen." Sweat was now dripping freely down Marcus's forehead, staining the collar of his shirt. He reached into the hidden pocket of his wallet and pulled out his emergency Amex, the one he used for his secret life. "This one," Marcus pleaded. "This one has to work." Jean-Luc didn't even leave the table. He swiped the card right in front of Marcus. "Beep. Declined. It seems all accounts linked to your social security number have been frozen pending a legal investigation." Marcus felt the room spin. "Look," he stammered, standing up, his knees knocking against the table. I need to make a call. My bank must have made a mistake. I just need to step outside for a second to get a signal." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Jean-Luc said coldly. "Mrs. Vance left specific instructions. Payment is required immediately. If you cannot pay, we are instructed to involve the authorities. Theft of services is a serious matter at the Aveline." Before Marcus could argue, a large figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Leo, the valet he had tossed his keys to earlier. Leo wasn't smiling. He was wearing a security earpiece and looked twice as big as he had in the driveway. "Is there a problem, Jean-Luc?" Leo asked, his voice deep and menacing. "Mr. Thorne is unable to settle his account," Jean-Luc replied, snapping the bill folder shut. Leo looked down at Marcus. The look wasn't one of anger, but of pity mixed with professional duty. "Sir," Leo said, "we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You pay the bill, or you come with us to the holding office to wait for the police." Marcus looked around the beautiful restaurant, the onyx walls shimmering like a mirage. He realized with sickening clarity that this was never his world. He had just been a guest, and his checkout time had passed long ago. The night of the anniversary, the walk from the chef's table to the back office of the Aveline was the longest journey of Marcus Thorne's life. He wasn't escorted by the police just yet. That would be too loud, too disruptive for the other guests. Instead, he was flanked by Leo, the valet-turned-security enforcer, and a silent, terrifying man in a black suit named Mr. Kovic, who managed the hotel's loss prevention. They didn't take him through the lobby. They took him through the kitchen. Marcus, still wearing his Italian silk suit, slipped slightly on a wet patch of tile near the dishwashing station. A line cook laughed. The smell of dish soap and half-eaten truffle scallops filled his nose, a nauseating reminder of the dinner he couldn't pay for. "Guys, come on." Marcus pleaded, his voice high and thin. "I'm good for it. I just need to make a phone call to my bank. My assets are just tied up in futures." "Walk," Leo said, not even looking at him. They shoved him into a small, windowless room behind the loading dock. It smelled of stale coffee and ozone. On the wall, a bank of monitors showed every corner of the hotel. Marcus looked at the screen labeled Penthouse Office. The screen was black. She had turned the feed off. She was done watching him. "Sit," Mr. Kovic said, pointing to a metal folding chair. "Am I under arrest?" Marcus demanded, trying to summon a shred of his former arrogance. "Because if I'm not, this is kidnapping. My wife owns this place. When she calms down, she's going to fire both of you." Mr. Kovic smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He tossed a plastic bag onto the table. "Your wife," Kovic said, emphasizing the word, "had your personal effects removed from the presidential suite while you were eating appetizers. Your phone, your car keys, and this. Kovic dumped the contents of the bag. It was Marcus's clothes, not folded, but knotted together in a damp ball, and on top of the pile lay a single white envelope. Marcus reached for it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter on heavy cream-colored stationery. The letterhead read, Vance Holdings, LLC. He read it. To Mr. Marcus Thorne. Effective immediately, you are trespassed from the Aveline Hotel, the Aveline Spa, and all subsidiary properties managed by the Vance estate. Please be advised that the lease on your Mercedes S-Class is in the name of a shell company, Thorne Logistics, which you funded using a joint account. As the primary account holder, I have dissolved the shell company and surrendered the lease. The vehicle has been towed. Furthermore, regarding the outstanding bill of $18,450, the hotel will not be pressing charges for theft of services tonight. Instead, we have forwarded the debt to a collections agency. You have 30 days. E.V. She took my car, Marcus whispered. How am I supposed to get home? Leo checked his watch. The N train runs all night. Station is 3 blocks east. Leo opened the back door. The cold night air hit Marcus like a slap in the face. It was raining. Get out, Leo said. Marcus stumbled out into the alleyway. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind him, the lock engaging with a final metallic thud. He stood there in the rain, clutching the bag of his knotted clothes, his expensive suit soaking through. He reached into his pocket for his phone to call an Uber, only to remember his cards were frozen. He walked the 3 blocks to the subway. He jumped the turnstile because he didn't have $2.75. The legal slaughter. 3 days later, Marcus sat in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and aggression. He was sitting opposite Elena, but it felt like he was sitting across from a stranger. She wasn't wearing her oversized sweaters. She was wearing a structured white power suit that made her look like a modern-day celestial judgment. She didn't look at him. She looked at a file in front of her. Next to her sat Arthur Gable, his former boss. This is an intervention of sorts. Eleanor's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Sterling, began. But not the kind where we hug at the end. I don't understand why he is here, Marcus spat, gesturing to Gable. Because you idiot, Gable growled. Your wife, sorry, your soon-to-be ex-wife was kind enough to show me the forensic audit of your corporate sending before I went to the district attorney. Gable slid a thick binder across the table. Apex Logistics Internal Audit. M. Thorne. You charged $22,000 in client entertainment at a club called the Sapphire Room. Gable said, his face reddening. We looked it up, Marcus. It's a gentleman's club. Unless you were shipping strippers to Shanghai, that is not a logistics expense. Marcus shrank into his chair. I was building rapport, networking. You were building a harem on my dime, Gable snapped. We were going to prosecute. Felony embezzlement. You'd do 5 to 10 years minimum. Marcus felt the bile rise in his throat. Prison. He couldn't do prison. He was a man who needed 600 thread-count sheets. However, Ms. Sterling interrupted, tapping her pen on the table. Ms. Vance has proposed a solution. Marcus looked at Elena. Elena, baby, please. I know you still love me. We can work this out. I'll go to therapy. I'll sign a post-ENUP. Elena finally looked up. Her eyes were clear, devoid of the adoration he had exploited for a decade. You will sign, Elena said, her voice steady, but not a post-nup. You're going to sign a confession. Ms. Sterling pushed a document toward him. Here are the terms, the lawyer said. Number 1, You agree to an uncontested divorce. You waive all rights to alimony spousal support and any claim to the Vance estate or the marital home on Oak Drive. Number 2. You assume full liability for the $64,000 in credit card debt currently on your joint accounts. Number 3. You sign a promissory note to Apex Logistics to repay the embezzled funds over the next 10 years with interest. In exchange, Mr. Gable agrees not to file criminal charges, provided you never work in the logistics industry again. And if I don't sign, Marcus asked, his voice trembling. Then Arthur calls the police right now, Eleanor said simply. And I hand over the additional file I have regarding the second mortgage you tried to take out on my house by forging my signature. That's bank fraud, Marcus. Federal. Marcus froze. He thought she didn't know about that. He had practiced her signature for weeks. How? He croaked. I own the bank, Marcus. Elena lied. She didn't own the bank, but she owned enough shares that the branch manager called her personally when the application came through. But she liked the fear in his eyes. Marcus looked at the papers. He looked at the binder of evidence. He looked at the woman he had called mousy and boring to his mistress just 72 hours ago. He picked up the pen, the social media guillotine. If the legal battle was a slaughter, the public fallout was a nuclear winter. Marcus had assumed Sophie would disappear. He underestimated the survival instincts of a Gen Z influencer with a bruised ego and a need for content. 2 days after the anniversary disaster, Sophie uploaded a story time video to TikTok. Title GWM. While I tell you how I almost got arrested because of a broke CEO. The video went viral within hours. Sophie, applying impeccable contour while crying fake tears, recounted the entire evening. She didn't use Marcus's full name, but she used his initials MT and dropped enough hints, the Avaline, the logistics company, that the internet sleuths identified him by lunch. The hashtag #champagne taste tap water budget trended on Twitter X. Memes flooded the internet. One showed a picture of Marcus, taken from his LinkedIn profile, captioned, "When you order the Latour 82, but your card declines on a McChicken." Another showed Elena a blurry photo taken by a guest at the restaurant, standing like a queen. The caption read, "The boss fight you weren't ready for." Marcus couldn't leave his cheap motel room for a week. Every time he turned on his phone, he was being roasted by teenagers in countries he couldn't find on a map. His reputation wasn't just ruined, it was incinerated. 3 months later. The Blue Jay Motel was located near the airport, under the flight path of the outgoing 747s. The windows rattled every 7 minutes. Marcus sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, eating instant noodles from a styrofoam cup. He had sold his Rolex. It turned out to be a high-quality fake, which was another blow to his ego. Apparently the guy on Canal Street had lied to him too to pay for the first month's rent. He was currently working as a night shift stocker at a 24-hour megamart. It was the only place that didn't run a credit check or call his references. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn, one of the few apps he hadn't deleted, hoping for a recruiter to miraculously pity him. Recommended for you article, The Quiet Titan, How Elena Vance Rebranded the Avaline. Marcus's thumb hovered over the screen. He shouldn't click it. He knew he shouldn't. He clicked it. The article was in Forbes. There was a full-page photo of Elena. She was standing on the grand staircase of the Avaline, wearing a gown of deep crimson. She looked stunning. Powerful. The interview detailed her strategy. How she had acquired the hotel group quietly, how she had used her library time to study market trends and hospitality law, and then a paragraph that made Marcus stop breathing when asked about the sudden change in her public persona. Ms. Vance smiled. I spent a long time making myself small so that someone else could feel big. I realized that was a bad investment. You can't build a skyscraper on a foundation of insecurity. So I evicted the tenant and renovated the building. Marcus threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and cracked. He lay back on the bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. The roar of a jet engine shook the room, drowning out his scream. The victory lap. At that exact moment, Elena was sitting in the Obsidian. It was a Tuesday, usually a slow night, but the restaurant was packed. The Vance Vindication tasting menu was indeed the hottest ticket in town. Everything to your liking, Miss Vance. Henri the maitre d' stood at her table. It's perfect, Henri, she said. She wasn't eating alone. Across from her sat Leo, the former valet. He was no longer wearing the uniform. He was wearing a sharp, tailored suit. Eleanor had promoted him to head of security after he handled the Marcus situation with such discretion. The new security protocols are in place, Leo said, reviewing a tablet. And we've successfully integrated the new facial recognition software at the front desk. If Mr. Thorne tries to enter the premises, the silent alarm triggers before he even hits the revolving door. Good, Elena said, slicing into her steak. Though I doubt he'll be back. He doesn't like places where he has to pay up front. Julian, the general manager, approached the table with a bottle of wine. A gift, madame, Julian said, from the cellar. He presented the bottle. It was the Domaine de la Romane Conti, the same wine she had ordered on that fateful night. Shall I open it? Julian asked. Elena looked at the bottle. It was worth more than Marcus's car. It represented everything Marcus had wanted. Status, luxury, the envy of others. No, Elena said, smiling. Send it to the table in the corner. The young couple celebrating their first anniversary. I saw them checking the prices on the menu earlier. Tell them it's on the house. Julian smiled warmly. A lovely gesture, ma'am. We celebrate real love here, Julian, Elena said, picking up her water glass. Everything else is just a transaction. She watched as the waiter delivered the bottle to the stunned young couple. She saw the husband's jaw drop, saw the wife's eyes light up with genuine, unadulterated joy. They held hands across the table, terrified and thrilled. It was a look Elena and Marcus had never shared. Not once. She took a sip of her sparkling water. It tasted crisp, clean, and completely free of bitterness. Elena Vance had lost a husband, but she had found herself. And as she looked out over the dining room of the hotel, she owned in the city. She commanded, she decided it was the most profitable trade of her life. And that is the story of Marcus Thorne, the man who brought sand to the beach and a mistress to his wife's hotel. It's a brutal reminder that if you're going to live a double life, you'd better make sure your spouse isn't holding the master key to both of them. Marcus walked in, feeling like a king, and walked out owing a king's ransom. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a new drama. We drop new stories every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, check your deeds and always amerholtke your dinner bill.